I'm really happy to be kicking off Pride Month this month with a very lovely queer romance, Amelia If Only by Becky Albertalli. Hello friends, book lovers, and whoever else is watching this. I'm Emily at Midnight. Welcome to my channel. If you've been around my channel for a while, you might remember a short I made where I did an unboxing. I got this book, Amelia If Only, from Becky Albertalli. It was so exciting because I love this author. I have this book from her, Imogen, obviously, and it's literally one of my favorite romances that I've ever read. I think about this book all of the time. I really, really love it. I relate to Imogen in a lot of ways, and I just think that the way that the story was told was incredible. So when I won an Instagram giveaway to get an ARC or an ARC, it's a advanced reader's copy of Amelia If Only, I was so excited. So I read Amelia If Only this weekend, and I loved it. I really, really liked this book. It lived up to my highest hopes and expectations. The first thing that I want to talk about is the characters in this book, because that is something that I really, really loved about Imogen, obviously. The characters are very, very tactile. They're very different from each other. They have unique voices, unique ways that they react to things in a way that I think a lot of contemporary authors don't always nail down. Yeah, there's just a vibe to her characters where you can imagine them. You can imagine them being real and standing next to you and knowing how they would react to a situation. They're very flushed out in their voice and their reactions to things. And that carried over very well for this book. Amelia is this girl, and she is hilarious. She's very much the kind of friend that is constantly turning everything into a joke and deflecting things with jokes, and is very punny. I really, really love Amelia's voice throughout this book. There's this way that she describes things. There's some really good lines in there. The book follows her and her close friends. We have Zora, who is kind of the more nerdy friend, and she's like very supportive, kind of like mom vibes almost in their friend group. And then we have Mark, who's kind of the surly teenage boy and doesn't say a whole lot, but when he does, it's pretty funny. It's kind of to nag the other characters. And then his twin sister over here, Natalie, is very fun. She's also a little bit more introverted. I don't know how to describe her. Like, she's got this like sparkle in her eyes, you can tell as she talks about things. Very like sarcastic, but kind. I'm not even really sure how to explain her. I liked her a lot though as well. Oh, also, speaking of characters in this story, the characters in Amelia If Only overlap with Imogen, obviously, which was really exciting. I like when romance books do this, when the side characters from one book are the main characters from a past book. We do run into Imogen and Tessa, which is really fun. And I just love them so much, so I love to see them. The crossover is not such that it's like a series or you have to read Imogen, obviously, to understand Amelia If Only, but I did like catching up with two of the characters that I really love from a book I think about all the time. I can tell I'm going to be talking a lot about Imogen, obviously, in this review, and it's because I like it a lot, and also it's very similar to this book. So in Imogen, obviously, we had a lot of discourse around bisexuality, what it means to be queer, having people tell you that you're not queer enough, and what labels really mean to different people. Amelia If Only, on the other hand, has another layer of conversation where they're talking a bit about parasocial relationships, because the book revolves around this road trip to meet a YouTuber that Amelia is obsessed with. I really like the way that Becky Albertalli addressed this parasocial relationship, the toxicity of fan cultures. It's all just kind of like a subtle underlaying dialogue going on throughout the book. It is a big part of the book, but at the same time, it's not the main storyline. It just kind of happens as you go along and you're left to think about these things. And it's really interesting because it makes me think a lot about a lot of fandoms that I've kind of skirted around the periphery of, and the ways that I've seen them be toxic around each other and around the people that they're based around, especially fandoms around real people. For example, there's this whole deep dive I did one time on the side of the Taylor Swift fandom that is convinced that she's gay and has been having this secret relationship in the backgrounds, behind the curtains this whole time, which I think is really unfair to her as a real person. You can make these sorts of headcanons around fictional people, but when you're talking about a real person and they tell you something about themselves like, hi, I'm straight, and I've been straight my whole life, and now I'm dating Travis Kelce, like Taylor Swift does, then I don't think it's very fair to put a different narrative on them, even if you want to use them as representation for yourself. It's definitely healthier to approach representation with actual people who are in fact representing your identity. So there's that side of it that's kind of exploring parasocial relationships and toxic fandoms, and also what it can mean and how destructive it can be to real people to be shipping real people and kind of be stuck on forming them in a relationship with someone else that is made up out of your mind. I want to read you a snippet from one of the little online sections at the end of every chapter. There's a section that's just giving you a snippet of the online conversation that's going on throughout the book around this YouTuber and the fandom, just to hear how truly unhinged this is. I'm going to read you one of these posts that we have. Okay, so this is about the video titled Bromance AMA, not to be confused with a notorious AMA live. I will link below the full vid, but specifically note that Hayden purses his lips like an air kiss at the 4 minutes and 30-second mark, and Walt touches his hand to his chest at the 8 minutes and 14 mark. I'm guessing most of you didn't notice this, but you're probably aware that 4:30 and 8:14 are Walter and Hayden's birthdays, respectively. That is absolutely unhinged. If you're looking at timestamps and then relating them to birthdays, like, this is what I'm talking about, where it felt like that one video I watched that was like compiling all of the different clues to Taylor Swift's sexuality. It's just like absolutely unhinged stuff pulled from the depths of impossibility and put together in your own mind. And oh, it's so toxic. To be pinning this onto real people is just so unfair. They also talk a little bit about, they just kind of touch on queer baiting and if real people can queer bait, which they can't. If you're interested in that, if you even know what queer baiting is, go watch Savvy Writes Books video on it. I'll try and link the one that talks about this the most in this video. I really love her stuff. In fact, I discovered Becky Albertalli's books because Savvy Writes Books really likes her. And I mentioned that when Becky Albertalli selected me for winning this book, she emailed me to get my address to send this to me. I mentioned how I discovered her through Savvy Writes Books, and she was like, oh, it's fun to meet another Savvy fan. And this is so silly and random, and most of you will not appreciate this, but I appreciate it. And Becky Albertalli put one of the commenters in as Savvy Writes Books. That was such a fun little Easter egg. I'm not going to harp on the parasocialness too much more, but I did want to say I appreciated also the experience and how it's written of meeting a famous person in real life, because she does meet him. But I just really appreciate the way that Amelia's feelings in that moment are written, kind of the collision of someone that you know from online, someone that is famous and you know they're real to a certain extent, but you've only experienced them through a screen, suddenly having them be in the flesh in front of you and they're too big and too small all at the same time, and kind of all the emotions that come down with that as you realize that they are in fact just frighteningly human like the rest of us. And hopefully they're just as nice as their online personas. There's also another romance in this book that I could definitely read an entire book about, but unfortunately I think we got a little bit too much of it in this book for it to warrant a book all on its own, which is sad, but Becky Albertalli is just too good at writing romances and makes me want to read a book about every single person she puts on a page. I also really appreciated the way that Amelia's bisexuality as part of her identity is explored through the book, because she starts the book out knowing that she's bisexual and she's in a friend group with a lot of other queer people, but she notes that like her bisexuality didn't seem to be that big of a part of her compared to everyone else. It existed, but it wasn't the main thing that she thought about when she thought about her sexuality. It was just sort of there. I don't want to speak for someone else, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that being something that Becky Albertalli is sort of reflecting from herself onto the book, because that is something I've seen in some of her writing before, kind of just exploring that less often talked about side of queerness that is bisexuality. Some other fun quirks about this book that I really liked is the like puns and nicknames that Amelia gives everyone, and also this like quirky thing they have going on with verb tenses. So Zora, one of Amelia's friends, is a mega nerd, and one of her passions is grammar and verb tenses, and so they kind of describe life and people in verb tenses, and I just love it so much. Like, that sounds really nerdy, but when you read it, it works. You don't actually have to understand what all the verb tenses mean. I promise you'll be okay. This should be a surprise to no one if you're thinking about verb tenses and moods. The subjunctive mood comes up a whole bunch, which is this whole if only idea. If I were a rich man is the subjunctive mood. It's like thinking about a possibility that could be out there. And so Amelia spends a lot of this book thinking about the if onlys, and so the subjunctive mood comes up quite a bit. It's a little bit nerdy, but you don't need to understand it to be able to follow along, I promise. And that's not the only thing that Albertalli puts in this book that's sort of a snippet to another thing. Obviously, she has incredible music tastes. I say this because filtered all throughout this book are references to specific songs. Again, you don't have to have heard them in order to understand what she's getting at. The songs are kind of moods, but they're also described in the book, so you know what she's talking about even if you haven't heard the song. But if you want a playlist to listen to while reading this book, there is a whole list of songs that she mentions throughout it. She even has them in a paragraph here. Kathy's song, Kodachrome, God Only Knows, Something, A Case of You, a song for the asking. Oh, don't forget Bridge Over Troubled Waters. They talk about that song a lot. And she talks about Simon and Garfunkel all throughout. And I kind of like that a lot of these songs that she references and artists are already a little bit timeless. They're not quite from this era, and so you can tell they've stood the test of time already. And that goes for a lot of things that she talks about in this book that I feel like are quite ageless. Verb tenses don't really change all that often, and so there is that kind of timeless quality to the writing, but there is also that like extreme presentness to the quality, where there's a lot of modern slang in the book as well. It doesn't feel overdone, and so I wouldn't say that's a negative to the book, but I do know some people have like major pet peeves to modern slang, but that's just kind of impractical. If you're trying to write a contemporary novel, you have to kind of use contemporary language, and I thought it was done well. There's also this fun vibe to the book about nostalgia and change, basically just talking about how you can feel nostalgia at the end of something and also for the beginning of another time period, and what it's like to struggle with change and that sort of thing. And I feel like both of these things, this like idea of like presentism, nostalgia, and also this sort of fighting against change are both done really well in this book. They're very encapsulated by the author here. I felt a lot of the feelings that Amelia is talking about feeling about leaving high school behind when I left college behind, and also when I left high school behind. But it was very relatable and fun to read. I liked the characters. It was super fast going, especially since I hardly ever read with my eyeballs these days. The fact that I read this in 2 different evenings tells me a lot. So it was really fun to read. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm definitely giving it 5 stars because there's not really anything I didn't like about it. And I knew I would like it because this is an author I already love and trust. So yeah, that's my review. 5 stars. This is a book I was gifted, so full disclosure, but it's a book I was gifted by an author I already knew I would love. So that's how I'm kicking off Pride Month this month. Let me know what you're reading for Pride Month. Definitely give me those recommendations in the comments below. I'm really excited to see what you're reading and hopefully pick up some of those books as well. If you liked this video, definitely subscribe and give me a thumbs up. It really gives me a boost in the algorithm. And if you're interested in fantasy or sci-fi or romance or vampire books, these are all things I talk about a lot. I've been getting into horror a lot too. So definitely check out some of my playlists and other videos. If you haven't seen my Wheel of Time review series, I'm about 3 books in, so definitely go check that out. And feel free to follow my Instagram, Goodreads, Storygraph, etc., all of which are Emily at Midnight and are linked in the description below. Have a wonderful day, treat people with respect, and pick up a book.